Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'll be sharing with you what it was like for me travelling in Albania, specifically as a solo female. Albania was the only country I felt particularly targeted as a female. There were other smaller instances in other countries, but there were more problems when I was in Albania. So I stayed in a hostel called ALL STARS Tirane, and I was in Tirana from the 31st of July till the 3rd of August this year. The bus station is quite away from the city. Thankfully, my hostel was between the bus station and the city, so it wasn't too far. And there is also a direct road to get to the town centre if I wanted to, so ignore all the taxi drivers, like in every other Balkan country, who just want to rip you off. I was arriving there from Skopje, and obviously I will make another video detailing my exact travel experiences, so stay tuned for that. So the hostel didn't seem to have much of a sign outside. After finding it, I could see the sign, but it was hard to find. So I had to ask for directions from some people in a shop nearby as to where exactly the hostel actually was, because I just kept walking down the road and back up the road and not finding anything. There was only one other person staying in my room. By the way, this is my 6th bedroom, which turned out to have 9 beds. Thankfully they weren't all full on any night. It always makes me a little bit uncomfortable when I only share with one person. It normally doesn't happen, but on the off chance it does, it can make me a bit uncomfortable, solely for the sake of my safety, especially when I'm in a mixed dorm and the other person is male, which was what happened in this case. So almost immediately after I arrived and I started looking around the facilities and the room, I realised that it wasn't as was shown on the website. First of all, I found a plug socket at the end of my bed, and it was away from the wall, as you can see here, and it didn't look very safe. Next, I saw that a bed across from me had a broken frame. I then went into the kitchen to find that there was a sign that had been put up to say, "You must pay before using the kitchen, €3. So it was a bit annoying, but I did have some euros on me because later in the trip I was supposed to be going to Montenegro, which got cancelled, and I also went to Kosovo, which uses the euro, so I did have some euros on me, thankfully. But and that's actually something that is quite common in that area of the world. I noticed that they said it also in Croatia, but they normally try and charge you more in euros because they try and prey on the people who might not know the exchange rates. The kitchen that we had to pay to use was also filthy. The only thing I could use in there was the fridge, which was thankfully not turned off as the gas was to the cooker. But on my bed there was no duvet, there was only one blanket, which was a really rough fabric. Also, we had a balcony attached to our room, and people were always smoking out there and it stank of smoke. As someone who comes from a non-smoking household, it's very hard to suddenly be in a place where you have to smell it 24/7. I'm fine if people are smoking on the street or something, however, I can't deal with people smoking inside. So this man who was in my room, who we will talk about more later in the story, seemed to think he knew everything. I was going to get some money out, some leke, on that evening, and he started getting confused as to which bank I could go to, because he thought I could only get money out of a cash machine if it was with the bank that I was with. Obviously this isn't true. And I went to one and he's like, "Oh, how can you do that? Oh, it used to be how much are you getting out? And he was just way too interested in my stuff. So I got out in a month and he started talking about the prices before inflation and stuff. And I was just so confused at that point. He seemed very opinionated about very weird things. Anyway, we went to get a donut because, you know, what else am I going to do on my first night? On my second day, which was the 1st of August, I finally had a chance to explore Tirana, and I went to Skanderborg Square, which is the main central place in Tirana. So it's very modern. They've clearly redone it since the communist era in Albania so as to make it a bit more presentable. And there are loads of water features. Now, this is good because it can get very hot in Albania, and there are features such as fountains that spray up from the middle of the floor, so children will play in these and run through them and stuff. There are also these waterfall things which go down the square. There were these little slits, like almost like what you'd see on a post box, about that size, and water would just come up out of them, and because it's on a bit of a hill, it would just roll down the side of the square into a drain. And walking further down, I walked through a park and I could see geckos which were basking on the slabs. So I walked over the river and I went to the Pyramid of Tirana, which was an attraction which kept coming up in my searches for Tirana. So I thought, okay, let's go and see it. It is a communist era building. Felt really eerie when I was there. So whereas Skanderborg Square, there are loads of people constantly going round, walking across the square just to get places. The pyramid is not like that. So the pyramid, which you can see here, was made of concrete and these old-fashioned glass panels. The concrete had loads of graffiti on it and many of the windows were broken. The river, which I had to cross to get there, I say river. So I thought it was very small for the main waterway in a capital city, as normally the river is used for trade with other countries, which is what makes capital cities grow. However, I'm fairly sure that is not big enough to get a boat down to transport goods. So I am a bit confused as to how Tirana grew to be so big. I thought I'd cheer myself up in the evening with some chocolate chip cookies, some of which turned out to be raisins. On the 3rd day, on the 2nd of August, I was supposed to go on a trip which was called Caves and Canyons, and it was off of TripAdvisor for Tirana. So I got up early because I needed to get ready. I packed all of my stuff. I packed my swimming costume and stuff because I was thinking, oh, you can go swimming in the lakes. I was downstairs in the cafe area of hostel. I waited. It said I should be picked up between I think 9 and 9:30. So I waited from 8:30 till 10. And at 10 we started to call any contact numbers we could find. The owner of the hostel was helping me at this point because I can't speak Albanian. Also, Albanian is a ridiculous language. Side note, it is not linked to any other languages. I was thinking when I was there, it doesn't sound like any other Slavic language. I was thinking maybe it's linked to Greek. No, completely standalone language, not linked to anything. We eventually managed to ring a number with no answer, and I told my mum, like, there's a problem here. My trip, which I paid for, hasn't turned up. My mum was obviously annoyed because I'd spent about £30 on this trip and I was looking forward to this day trip. She spent about 3 hours on the phone on my behalf. So because I couldn't do anything more interesting, I went back into the centre of Tirana where Skanderborg Square was. I did end up getting a refund for the trip, but It took a while. So I did much the same as I did the day before. I walked around, found some geckos, tried to catch some geckos. I went through some stalls. There was one street with a little bit of a market on it. There's a nice fountain that I was sitting by for a while, which is at the end of the street where there's loads of embassies. So when I got back to the hostel the night before, so the second night I was staying there were 2 other people in the room who were Syrian refugees, Syrian people who were trying to escape into Europe to have a better life, and therefore it was thankfully not just me and creepy man in the room. So this man, he had asked me questions and tried to be a bit too close to me. I started to get a bit creeped out and try and keep my distance. He asked me things like if I was a virgin. He wanted to friend me on social media and stuff. I was packing for the next day when I was going on to my next city, which was Pristina. I was just checking, like, there wasn't anything under my pillow that had got lost. Under my pillow, I found a cigarette stain, a burn mark from where someone had put out a cigarette, and I guess someone had just come in from outside. However, what concerned me is the fact that this was still crumbly. It was like my sheets hadn't been washed since it had happened, and the sheets were a bit off colour anyway, a bit yellow. But seeing that and realising that there had likely been someone else sleeping in that bed before me and it hadn't been washed in between, that, or someone in the room had moved my pillow and put out a cigarette on my bed. Several times I saw people lighting up cigarettes in the room, and I was messaging my mum like, I feel really uncomfortable, I just want to leave. And I should have listened to her at that point. I should have just left and gone to a different hotel or hostel. But at this point it was about 8 at night and I didn't really want to be in a city where I didn't speak the language trying to look for accommodation. So I said, I'm just going to stay here tonight, and I'll just leave early tomorrow morning. And that's what I did. Thankfully I didn't get assaulted in the night, but it was a genuine concern of mine that I would be. There have been other times when it hasn't been great, but there's never been another time when I've actually could consider myself to have been scared. If you ever feel that uncomfortable in a place, you should leave. Leave. There will be another hotel. There will be another hostel. Just look up online, maybe contact them, tell them the situation, get the hell out of there. The following morning, I lied about the time of my bus, just so that I had an excuse to leave the hostel. I told them, oh, I'm gonna be going by 10. Went and sat by the fountain, which I mentioned earlier, at the end of the street with loads of embassies on it. It linked the 2 streets together between the hostel and the bus station. So I just went and sat by the fountain for 2 hours staring at it. Actually, on the last night, I went out for dinner. I don't normally do this when I go abroad. I normally get my own stuff and cook. However, because I couldn't use the kitchen, I hadn't had hot food in so long, and I just didn't know what to do. I was just craving something hot. Apparently there's lots of Italians in Albania, so I went out for a pizza that was decent. I would always recommend getting a refundable room. It makes stuff like this a lot easier to deal with. I would also say take pictures and record everything. Anything which is not as they said, make a note of it. You have to make sure to leave a review. This also goes for good hostels. They do need good reviews as well, you know. But if you had a horrific experience, it's important that you leave a review and warn others. Also, he didn't register me, as far as I know, he didn't register me with the police, which is something that we're supposed to do when we go to other countries. And it always says, don't worry, if you're staying with friends or family, you need to do this yourself. If you're staying in a hotel or hostel, don't worry about it, the owner will do it for you. I'm fairly sure it was not registered. All the smokers left the door open all night, and this wasn't an issue because it was cold. Like, it wasn't cold, it was quite warm there. It was more of an issue partially because of the smoke, and also because mosquitoes. There was so many mosquitoes. I was itchy all over. It was painful. I've never had that many mosquito bites in my life. The only thing I miss from that hostel is the little cat. There are a lot of strays in countries like this. There were some stray cats which the hostel owner started feeding, so therefore they then belonged to them, really. And she had 2 kittens. One kitten was walking and was growing like a normal kitten. There was a little basket where they were putting the kittens when they were first born. And the other kitten was so small, barely had her eyes open. Knowing now that that kitten's probably dead, I was trying to do something for it when I was sitting in the cafe waiting for the day trip to happen, which never did, and it was heartbreaking. Final note to end this video on: don't be a dick to girls when they're travelling, especially if you're a 46-year-old man. He actually tried to message me after I had left Tirana, and I'll show you some messages and you can see in there he's really persistent. You can also see the English problems, so some of it doesn't really make sense. I guess beware in Tirana. It's actually a really lovely city in Scandibook Square and everything. Like, a lot of the modern stuff is so pretty, but don't stay in ALL STARS Hostel Tirane. Most people you meet when you're travelling are some of the best people you will ever meet in your life. Sometimes they are not good people. I'm gonna end it here. This was actually quite a hard video for me to make because I've never really had a bad experience of a country before. And the thing is, I do truly believe that Albania is a good country, but it's hard for me to look past that when I've had this happen to me so far. The countryside was actually really nice as well. So as I was on my way to Pristina, I took these photos, and it really is beautiful. And that's what I wanted to see on my Caves and Canyons tour. That whole trip didn't go to plan, but thanks for watching, and I hope my next video is a bit more uplifting.